America, good afternoon, Europe, and good evening, Asia. I'm David Goldman, a deputy editor of the Asia Times, and I have the honor to moderate what I think will be one of the most exciting and pertinent discussions on what's happening in the world economy. We're talking about the digital revolution in the global south, and we have the honor to have with us Dr. Christine Chang, who is the director of the World Bank's Digital Development Program, one of the epicenters of this revolution, and also from Huawei, Jun Xu, who's the Chief Technology Officer of the company's mining practice, and Andy Purdy, who's the Chief Security Officer of Huawei United States. I covered the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona for Asia Times in February, and it was an eye-popper. Let me just give you two numbers. There are 3 billion people in the global south, most of whom have been pretty much marginalized from the world economy, locked into relatively isolated and low productivity, very low income jobs. But there are also now 6.9 billion smartphones in the world. That's almost as many as the 8 billion people in the world. So the promise of connectivity that gives people information, access, and the ability to interact with the world market and communicate and develop information, develop businesses, is exploding. I think this may be one of the great developments in world economic history. We may sit here, we may look back on this like people in the 1830s when they saw the first railroads. And I'd like to direct the first question to Dr. Chang. If you look at this, not just as a World Bank official responsible for developing programs, but as an economist, is this one of the really big things in world economic history? Is the digital revolution something like the invention of the steam engine or the railroad or electric power? Is it of that magnitude? Should we be thinking of it that way?
Thank you, David. First, thank you for inviting me to be with you today at the Asia Times webinar. And I was actually in Barcelona as well for the World Mobile Congress. And this year, the theme is velocity. So you can imagine the speed of the change of technology is so fast. And potentially, of course, it brings about a lot of economic opportunities. And David, you mentioned several other technologies. And for me, digital is a general purpose technology. It's also a disruptive technology that by almost definition brings about potentially transformative changes. In our day-to-day work at the World Bank, we actually look at 3 layers of the digital infrastructure, so to speak. The first layer is broadband infrastructure. So that's the physical connectivity part that you mentioned. There's also digital data infrastructure. So that's the cross-cutting hard and soft infrastructure critical for storing, computing, and exchanging data. And we also have the digital public infrastructure. So that's the technical term. Sometimes people use digital public infrastructure, but it's really the digital stacks that we're talking about, comprising of digital identification, payments, and data exchange systems. And, I used to write a lot of reports about the role of the general purpose technology, digital. And not many people were convinced, let's say, 15, 20 years ago when the mobile revolution just started. But after the pandemic, I must say the silver lining is that no longer do we need to prove to people that this is a technology that changes the world. And if we don't manage the technology and also adjust the institutions to evolve together with the technology in terms of policies, regulations and institutions, then we as an institution will no longer be relevant to find the development solutions for the global South. And recently, we actually did quite a lot of studies just to see whether the digital economy, how it affects growth and productivity and job creation, and also, for our twin goals, namely poverty reduction and shared prosperity. We actually found quite some, good evidence. For example, 10% increase in internet adoption could lead to 0.5 to 1.2% income growth. And in a particular, country in Africa, 3G coverage already has been linked to a 4 to 10% reduction in extreme poverty. So the list can go on, according to our recent studies. At the same time, I would also add two cautionary notes on digital transformation. Is it also needs to be carefully managed to mitigate important risks, such as digital inclusion and also cyber risks. On digital inclusion, you already mentioned that last year, close to 3 billion people globally still remain unconnected, and 1/5 of the population in Africa is still not reached by the basic 3G network coverage, and 30% of the global population is still not using the internet. And on cybersecurity, we know that the total economic cost in 2020 was about 4 to 6% of global GDP. And from 2019 to 2023, approximately 5 trillion in global value will be at risk from cyber attacks. So maybe in summary, digital technology is a transformative technology, could bring transformative benefits if we manage the risks right.
Well, thank you, Christine. Andy Purdy, Huawei just released its annual results. Your revenue held up under, let's say, what were challenging conditions. You're 5% of your revenue on GDP, which is an extraordinary number. So clearly, Huawei as a company sees enormous potential here. There, on a local basis, we're seeing some really disruptive and extraordinary growth possibilities through digital technology. Could you give us some examples of areas, industries, countries where the digital revolution is already changing people's lives in an important way?
And it really is about combining software, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, sensor technology, big data analytics. And so it's really bringing about a digitization of a number of industry sectors. And we're beginning to see widespread deployment in a few countries in the world, which gives us a lot of encouragement. We'll talk in a moment about mining, smart ports, the ability to use the technologies to create automation, more effective monitoring, reduce the carbon footprint. In cases such as 5G healthcare, ambulances, the ability to start providing medical analysis and treatment to the patients in the ambulances on the way to the hospital, so that some patients can go directly into surgery when they arrive. The manufacturing work that's being done to improve efficiency, reduce the carbon footprint, and improve the resilience of the manufacturing, so better monitoring and prediction of issues that could arise. But these go across to smart farming, green energy that was just mentioned. So we are seeing tremendous traction in the next year or two. It's going to be really, really exciting. But I do want to applaud Christine's point and the World Bank and the UN's point about us all working together to promote greater connectivity to those who don't have connections, because that's essential for them to have a chance to have a decent life.
Andy, let me try to put this in context. Huawei has been developing a smart port in Tianjin. And according to the numbers that you circulated, the time to unload a big container ship has gone down from 8 hours to 40 minutes. because of 5G, artificial intelligence. You have smart cranes picking stuff up off a ship, putting them into autonomous trucks, sending them off to warehouses where they'll be unloaded by robots. So that's like a tenfold increase in efficiency. Is that what we're talking about? Where digital technology
That
is
is
the
definitely
equivalent
one
of
of the
building
things.
10 ports instead of one? Is it that big?
That's definitely one of the things we're talking about. When you see some of the supply chain disruptions and some of the backups at ports during the pandemic. So the one port that I was researching in China that handles 3 million containers every year, 10,000 per day. The ability to use driverless automated trucks, automated cranes, so that you can monitor these things, but you can safely and efficiently move the containers from the ships to where they need to go in a way that humans couldn't possibly do by themselves. So it just has tremendous benefits for the companies and the end users.
So if we're talking about developing countries that have bottlenecks in ports, which are a constraint on, say, manufacturing, then the digital technology would save them an enormous amount of money and infrastructure and allow them to up their game very, very quickly.
And along the way, the ability to more effectively monitor and control the use of energy, the storage of energy, the transmission of energy, to try to minimize the use of energy during more dormant times. All these things can have tremendous benefit in reducing the carbon footprint.
Zheng-Xu, your focus is on mining, which is one of the most important, but also one of the toughest, sometimes most dangerous industries. Can you tell us a little bit about where the digital revolution is having an impact? Give us an idea of what we can expect going forward.
Hi, hey David. Thank you for having me. Good evening from China. Yes, I think it's totally agree what Christine said about how we look at 3 layers of digital infrastructure. I think in the mining sectors, it is definitely become a must-have, right? So think about a few examples. Worker, the real-time positioning. So how you locate all your workers, your equipments in a underground mine or open pit mine. So that really depend on a good network. If you don't have a broadband, you don't have a good network, there's no way you can have that type of critical or mission critical applications to make sure those equipments. That is also depend on a good infrastructure. You have to have a good network. You have to have a fast servers, all of that to be able to smoothly remote control those and to operate those equipment remotely, right? I think the digital technology really help the mining operators. I call these days it a second kind growth curve. For the last 30 years or 40 years, the mining operators grow their productivities mainly by applying bigger and bigger equipment, more automated equipment. So I think the next really growth curve is to apply digital technologies, right? As I mentioned, network, cloud computing, self-driving equipment. So that is become a second growth curve for them. For the last 30 years, by applying bigger modern equipment, all the miners globally really grew their productivity, maybe tenfold or even higher, right? Everywhere. But that growth is flattening out. Some of the open pit mine are using 500 tons of trucks. It couldn't grow any bigger, right? So I think they are turning their attention to apply those digital technologies to fuel a next phase of growth. I believe it will happen.
Christine, we're talking about big top-down projects, ports which can put 10 times the number of containers, or mines which can extract a great deal more ore with fewer numbers of people, with big productivity numbers. In terms of the way this affects the behavior of people at the grassroots of the economy, somebody who's been in a marginal economic position now has a smartphone, has the ability to develop information, connect to world markets. Can you give us an idea of how this is affecting the way ordinary people live and economic activity in the parts of the global South, which might be changed in an important way?
Maybe, David, I can just use a recent report that we will launch very soon in the coming months that talks about actually the gig jobs in global South. I think, as you mentioned that, and also Andy and Jun also mentioned, it's a little bit, the digital technology is a bit a must-have, right? Must-have in the sense that, it gives people the economic opportunity. It connects ordinary people to markets, to information, and to just, tremendous range of opportunities, not necessarily that are locally available. So our study, actually, it's a very interesting one. It identified a total of 545 online gig work platforms across the globe, and with headquarters in 63 countries and platform workers and clients located in 186 countries. So the online gig work now constitutes a growing part of the labor market, accounting for a range from 4.4 to 12.5% of the global labor force. So that is a staggering amount of 150 to 430 million workers. Although developed countries still dominate the demand for the online labor, the demand from developing countries is increasing at a much faster rate. Let me just take Africa as an example, because we know that the particular region is our focus for development work. It also has very high informality and self-employment that characterize much of the structure of the most economies and labor markets in this region. And earlier in March, we have a report called Digital Africa, technological transformation for jobs. And nearly 9 out of 10 workers in sub-Saharan Africa are employed in informal labor markets, and over 70% of workers are informally self-employed. So that is as high as 92% in Western Africa, often actually with unpaid family members. So this is just a picture that you can see that businesses in Africa's informal sector, which are often tightly linked to households, face many challenges that an internet economy can help alleviate significantly. Some of these benefits include reduction of transaction costs, enabling access to finance, improved business practices, increased information about prices, and fewer intermediaries that often cut the profits for the poor. So these are illustrations that digital transformation interventions that aim to improve the productivity of micro enterprises can help reduce the gender inequality in internet access and income. So David, I'll stop here because I have just so many examples that show that digital transformation can just give new opportunities to individuals, to small businesses, and also to households.
Christine, let me ask you to ballpark this. We're talking about people in the informal economy in West Africa who have extremely low incomes, say $2 to $4 a day. That's real absolute poverty. They have very little access to services, very little access to information, very little access to the money economy. Suddenly they've got a smartphone. They can do payment transfers. They can get access to jobs. They can work in the gig economy. They can expand their business. They can also get microloans. So are we talking about an order of magnitude increase in incomes as they move into the digital economy in the first phase, or 5 or 10 times? It seems to me that we're looking at an enormous change in the quality of life for a very large number of people.
This is correct. Because I think, if we look at the digital transformation framework that the World Bank developed, right? So we talked about different layers. So you have the connectivity, we call them foundational digital transformation layer. And then we are also helping countries to build accelerators. So by definition, these accelerators are, a trusting, environment to use internet, and then digital skills, digital capabilities that people need to have to absorb, the connectivity. And then you also have the digital IDs that could identify either individuals or businesses and connect them to the economy. Just one more example, I'm quite excited about the very powerful impact that digital technology could bring is, when you get to the use cases, right? That's where the impact really came about. Is in Nigeria, for example, a distribution platform that's called Trade Depot, that really relies on digital technology to improve supply chain management of informal retailers. Just within 1 year, the number of active retailers on the platform jumped from 2,000 to 15,000. Again, this is just numbers that, the multiply effect can be so huge with digital technology.
Andy Purdy, let's continue talking about the human dimension of this. I was just reading a news report this morning that Huawei proposes to develop 50,000 information technology talents in South Asia in the next 5 years. And I know Huawei has a program with the Indonesian government to train cybersecurity experts for the government, I think up to 10,000 people. What do you see happening in terms of the development of human capital and talent in the global South, and how will this contribute to the revolution we're talking about?
Well, I think it has to go hand in hand with helping to provide an information and communication technologies infrastructure with which these people can connect. The ability to connect and the ability to access cloud resources is going to be very important, and the opportunities provided by some startup programs so that small and medium-sized enterprises can see a pathway to innovation and greater things. So that goes hand in hand with the need to train talent. The ability to have remote training. We have a digital truck that goes throughout Europe and throughout other parts of the world to help train people, to help get folks excited and get started, and then can be supplemented with the online training. The challenges and the opportunities for people across the education spectrum to create the skills and techniques, in some cases certifications, so that they're going to be able to do business, they're going to be able to operate as individuals, as small businesses, and to contribute to larger businesses is absolutely critical. The importance of workforce planning, workforce strategy, and we need it in the United States as well as the digital South to try to help those who are underskilled and undereducated, and to make sure that at the high end of the technological potential, that folks have the skills they need to be part of helping move toward this intelligent world in a way that can benefit everyone.
Again, let me try to ballpark the size of this thing. I mentioned before that there are 6.9 billion smartphones in the world. I think the right number for the number of people with access to 5G around the world is about 1 billion. That's, of course, including China, which has the largest number, and Europe and the United States. How do you see the dissemination of broadband happening in the next few years? Are we going to see, doubling, tripling, quadrupling? When are we going to have a world where practically anyone can pick up an inexpensive smartphone, plug into an online tutorial, and learn how to develop a new skill?
Well, given the projections of user access to 5G, extrapolating from the tremendous growth in the last 3 years, there's going to be exponential growth in the next 3 to 5 years of 5G user access. We also think that the real speeds that will be available will also increase. Sometimes in countries you have 5G in some spot areas, but the speed might be less than 4G. And the combination of that with what we've seen in the last 3 years with large-scale commercial deployment of 5G-enabled technologies gives us a strong reason to think that those technologies are going to go beyond those leading countries like China, South Korea, Switzerland, Finland, Kuwait, and some others. India has been very, very active. That as companies, enterprises, academics get a better feel for the kinds of possibilities, the kinds of impacts that my colleagues and you have been talking about, David, it's very, very exciting. And I think one of the things that we realized, and we saw a lot of discussion at Mobile World Congress, is trying to help make it easier for those who would benefit, whether it's the carriers or whether it's industries. What are the priorities for building the ICT infrastructure and the cloud bases? What are the priority use cases and business cases so that they can maximize investment to get greater return? And that's true whether you're a carrier or whether you're a private company. You have to be able to prioritize and get some results so that those who are helping provide your funding are going to keep providing the funding, and then your customers and their customers are going to get the benefits a lot more quickly.
Thank you, Andy. A quick note to our audience. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a Q&A button. We'll reserve some time at the end of the hour for audience questions. So if you have a question, please do put it in the Q&A, and we'll take them in the order that we come. 5G has some big differences with 4G. One is the amount of data it can carry, and another is low latency, that is instantaneous response time. So a lot of things become possible with 5G that were not possible with earlier iterations of the technology. Could you give us a couple of examples of where 5G is making a big difference in industries in the global south, be it education, health, manufacturing? I know your field is mining, but try to give the audience a bit of a picture of what kind of things they can expect to see happening.
Yes, I think, David, I would add one more difference between, the 4G and the 5G. It is the density, right? 5G actually, we can have a much denser coverage. So a lot more equipment can connect to a 5G station than the 4G. So I think that the importance of all the three things that we mentioned really enable us to do things that was, almost impossible from an industry point of view. I think Christine, Andy talked a bit on the consumer side of the application. I think it's really, for me to look at on the other side is how 5G can enable industry applications from Industry 4.0s, all the IoT connectivities to self-driving applications in a business environment. For example, minings, ports, even an industry campus with a good 5G network, you can achieve as I said, a very low latency network, high bandwidth, and that kind of application to enable those type of applications, right? I think what we see from the mining side, definitely, which I focus on, 5G become a necessary network for autonomous driving applications, right? So, in other industries that we see, people leveraging a good 5G network for their IoT connectivities. So I think the possibilities are endless. With this great 5G network, we can really find those killer apps in the industry. So I still strongly believe that 5G not only improve the connectivities for the consumer day-to-day usage, like search a web, play games. I think that the other very important applications are on the industry side. I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting use cases in those areas. And Huawei, what we are working on this area for the last quite a few years, we call 5G to business use cases. I think that's a very exciting areas. So just when people study 5G, don't forget about.
Apart from mining, any specific examples you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, I think it's look at the I was in a steel manufacturing plant. So those are not only just the self-driving, not just cars, all the self-driving equipment, they all rely on a 5G network. So across all the industries, even in the manufacturing, manufacturing plants, they have so many sensors that need to be connected, collecting data. So with a traditional 4G network, that's very hard for them to do because of the density, the number of sensors in per square meters or per kilometer. So with a 5G network, so those type of applications become possible.
David, there are a number of things.
Oh, sorry, Andy, go ahead, please.
There are a number of these technologies that are really helping kind of in the larger kind of environmental and ecosystem context. The acoustics monitoring in various rainforest areas, the ability to detect gunshots or trucks that are in an area that is protected. There are a number of programs that we've been involved with a rainforest effort. And so, for example, in Greece, real-time acoustic monitoring for gunshots for poachers that threaten some of the endangered species such as antelopes in that country. You also have environmental monitoring in Italy, where the number and density of fauna and endemic species there, and so the biodiversity is again threatened by illegal logging, habitat destruction, and so the monitoring can notify the rangers or the law enforcement. You have the Austria's wetlands to look for challenges of using again acoustic monitoring, understanding the water levels, climate change. In Ireland, the monitoring of the whales to see where they're threatened and how their patterns change. In Norway, salmon protection. I mean, there's so many different ways that this technology, high up in trees or far under the water, or out in deserts, or an offshore oil and gas monitoring, and locations where there might be the possibility of theft, or there might be a malfunction that someone needs to be deployed to help address it. So all these kinds of technologies, the harder to reach, the harder to find, the harder to monitor, the need for greater efficiency and to reduce the carbon footprint, all are some very concrete benefits.
Christine, let me pick up on Andy's point on the quality of life issues. I mean, obviously, digital technology has enormous applications to education, as we saw with a mixed success during the COVID lockdowns. And also remote healthcare, which is surely one of the most interesting applications. A surgeon in Eastern China earlier this year performed a gallbladder operation on a patient in Xinjiang 4,500 kilometers away using a robot on a 5G network. I believe it was the first fully remote surgery. Now, certainly for countries with limited health resources, digital technology can improve the reach and efficiency of those for very large numbers of people. Is that something, I'm sure that's something the World Bank is interested in. If you could tell us a bit about that, we'd be grateful.
Yeah, David, I think one question that we have been brainstorming, we're going through a evolution roadmap exercise for the World Bank. It's basically an exercise that we undertake every 15, 20 years. And it's a little bit introspection just to see whether as a development agency, we're still relevant for our client countries. So in this context, there's a big question whether digital is a global public good, in the sense that, now we are entering a new phase where in the world there are just multiple crises, right? So we call it crisis facing development. So for us, it's important to see what digital technology, what role, what solutions it's bringing to our countries to address global challenges. So I think, some of the things that you mentioned earlier on health and education, I think we've been doing that for quite a long time, but we are also seeing that, the global crisis, I can mention a few. We are all familiar with the COVID pandemic. We are all familiar with, the war in Ukraine, and then, the related, food insecurities and the climate crisis. So the big question for an organization like the World Bank is that, can we address these global crises and global challenges with digital technology? So one example, I can cite a few examples, considering the challenges that government agencies actually faced in using data as part of the responses to COVID-19. And we did, a survey in 85 countries that we supported during the pandemic. We did find out that digital ID and digitalized registries were able to, countries with, the digital public infrastructure or the digital stacks, they were actually able to reach 3 times more citizens, more beneficiaries with social payments to better cope with the fallout from COVID compared to countries that had to collect new information from scratch. So that's just one example, but similar lessons apply also to natural disasters and conflicts where governments may need to identify and reach and target people with services and payment on very short notice digitally. And I think, Andy and June also mentioned examples where, digital technology, digital innovations can be harnessed to address, climate change and achieve carbon neutrality. We had an example in Maldives. We are supporting a climate data platform that will improve analysis, information sharing, and support the government to, collect the data on coral reefs and make data-driven decisions in managing natural resources and protecting critical resources. So let me stop here, David. What I'm trying to say is that, we're building digital databases and data platforms to help really the world to cope with multiple and overlapping crises as we look forward to the next decade.
Thank you, Christine.
Follow up?
Yes.
Yeah, I think another thing that combines a lot of these things, and you see an example in Thailand in the Eastern Academic Corridor, where the use of technologies in smart cities to do multiple things. So smart lamp poles, environmental sensors, large screens, cameras, emergency calls in fire, so that if there's a disaster, if there's an accident, but in everyday life, if there's a change in terms of the environmental quality, in terms of the air, in terms of the water. We had a recent train accident in the United States where the fumes caused problems. So that ability to have a greater monitoring of the things that are most important, and even some things that seem less important, such as traffic lights, to make sure they're timed a lot better so that you don't have cars waiting forever burning carbon while they're waiting for a chance for the light to turn green. So a number of these in communities and smart cities can provide some great benefits.
We've got a number of questions from the audience, one or two of which I'd like to fold in now. Christine's point about digital technology and its ability to help governments reach people in need under conditions of crisis is an important one. When I grew up in development economics, doing work in Latin America in the 1980s, a lot of countries, you'd go into a government office and you'd need 19 permits, say, to ship a truckload of wood from a rural area to the capital, and you'd have to pay 19 bribes. The ability of digitizing public services makes possible government transparency and reduce the cost, increase the efficiency in providing services, as well as dealing with emergencies. It also, of course, gives governments, a great deal more power, and that worries some people. One of our listeners said, "What should the public and or the private sector do to mitigate the harms of technology?" When I think of harms of technology, I think of the increased surveillance and potential lack of freedom as a result. That's a tough one. Andy, why don't I dump it in your lap?
Well, I think one area we've seen a lot of publicity about it, and some calls for action has to do with protection of data, for example, of social media companies, and the question of anonymization, pseudonymization of identifying information, the ability to put in place mechanisms to have effective control on whether, when, and how, and who gets access to data, and what the kind of data is that they can get access to. I think we have to look beyond the traditional approaches. Okay, we're going to have a law, and I think we do need a privacy law in the United States. We're going to have a law that requires companies to do X, Y, Z, but there needs to be a greater independent ability. It's not enough now for publicly traded companies to have auditors, licensed auditors who come in to evaluate the books. Some very sensitive activities, there needs to be some independent third parties who can monitor this and have technology to help make it possible to monitor this, so there can be alerts, there can be feedback, frankly, there can be transparency, and there can be accountability. So I think that's an area where we have a ways to go, but I think there's some opportunities.
If I'm understanding correctly, Andy, digital technology can be used to reduce anonymity and reduce, increase surveillance, or it can be used to increase privacy and protect individuals, and it really depends on how it's used. So,
well, that's right. And when you look at like AI and a lot of issues about it now, but the importance of cross-border data flows to help promote the kinds of rich AI that's possible, but making sure that the personally identifiable information is not part of what flows. So yeah, I think there's some tremendous possibilities, but there are things that we have to be concerned about. But we can't just say we're concerned about something without trying to do things to effectuate the protection that I think most of us would value.
Christine, we have a question from a listener which bears on something you mentioned in passing before. In traditional society, most women work in the household. They do domestic, their activity is domestic. They aren't typically involved in the money economy. Certainly, the digital economy can give a deal more opportunity to women in traditional society. Is this something I know the World Bank's looked at it. Perhaps you could elaborate on this a bit more.
Yeah, certainly, part of the digital divide is the gender divide. The global data shows that actually 16% of women are, if you compare the percentage of men who use internet versus the women who use internet, there is a difference of 16%. So that translates into, hundreds of millions of women that do not have access to digital. So we recognize the potential, again, digital technology could bring to everyone, including women and in particular women and youth, through several channels. One is that, we recognize that, digital payment, right? Digital payment actually when digitally available, a lot more women now gain access actually to bank accounts. So that's something that certainly improves economic empowerment by women. And the other channel is that, I was actually with quite a few African institutions that provide training to individuals, for them to gain, again, job opportunities. We also recognize that digital curricula actually are, tend to be more flexible for women, because in some, society, women are not allowed to actually leave their household chores, or, their husbands do not want them to go to, training courses with other men. But digital courses actually provide the opportunity to women who can take, courses at home, and also, at their own pace. So these are just examples where digital technology could provide, training opportunities, but also financial access, which, these two are big, factors for women to actually find, economic benefits and economic opportunities outside of their traditional households. So gender and inclusion is a big focus of most of our World Bank interventions. But still, the situation is still quite dire, and there is a long way to go.
The economist Edmund Phelps, who won the 2006 Nobel Prize, wrote a book a few years ago called Mass Flourishing, in which he argued that important sustained periods of growth, extraordinary growth, come from the willingness of the whole population to innovate, people at every level of society to embrace innovation, from scientists and government officials to entrepreneurs, to ordinary people starting businesses or learning new professions. From your perch at the World Bank, where you have an overview, an extraordinary view of these events, what do you see, how do you see the lives and activity of ordinary people changing with digital technology in a way that's going to shape our economy in the future?
What touches me most, David, is that, of course, everybody, high income, middle income, low income countries, they all recognize the importance of digital at varying degrees. But I must say, among all our client countries, actually the biggest voice, the biggest demand comes from Africa and South Asia. So I was a bit surprised in the sense that actually in many of these countries, we only have 3G and 4G networks, right? 5G networks are still being built. So that means the impact, the productivity gain, and the social benefits may not be as big yet as in high-income countries, including industry use that Dream mentioned earlier. But I was in a panel with, 4 ICT ministers from Africa and South Asia late last year. And they are really the big voices asking the World Bank support is in low-income countries. So I really asked why. And actually, 2 of the ministers said it very clear. One is that it provides, digital jobs for young people, because they are seeing that, there's, big population growth, and it will be a lot of, young people coming into the labor markets. And for them, the priority one, objective for development is to make sure that young people get jobs. That also creates a lot of stability in fragility countries. So that's one reason. The other is that it actually gives hope for low-income countries that maybe this is one technology where they can leapfrog, right? And maybe they don't need 3G, they can go to 5G directly. And in the sense that, they can basically overcome and leapfrog old generations of technology and benefit from the latest. So again, youth, jobs, and hope are really the 2 big factors where, low-income countries want to use digital and want to use more digital.
Thank you.
If I might add, I think one of the benefits we're seeing from a global community is where there are benchmarks or metrics to help give an assessment of where a region or where a country is doing. So with the 5G penetration, with some of the results in terms of what the carriers are doing, in terms of some of their solutions, in terms of green energy, we've worked actively to help create a green energy index, a green energy indicator, so that companies can be evaluated about whether or not they're meeting various requirements. And that's going through the international approval process now. Some of the problems with the learning is at the level of those who don't have the most basic skills. And we have that in distressed communities in the United States. You look at so many of our schools in distressed communities, so many of the children of lower economic status, they can't read at grade level. They can't do math at grade level. And after all these years of focusing on this problem, we don't do anything about it. And part of the reason is they don't have good metrics. It's like all the school districts need to have those scores, just like you need a green energy indicator for companies and for countries, so that there can be an assessment and there can be feedback on what needs to be done and what.
Thank you, Andy. If I could shift gear for a second, if you could give us a bit more of sort of a technical idea of what happens in an intelligent mind, what's so different about the new technologies and why it's so important, why it makes such a difference. I want to make sure we get that in before the hour is over.
I think when we talk about the digital infrastructures, I always like to think of from two ends of it. One is to really find those killer applications. When we have those applications that people want to use, people want to use them for all the time, that will drive us to build a greater infrastructure, right? So 5G is a good example. Some of those countries behind, not just in the greater south, but everywhere. I think one of the reasons is lack of applications, lack of killer apps, right? I think that's for us as people in the industries, people in the information industry. I think we'll need to work together to really look into the application areas. What can we do with that infrastructure? So second is building the infra. As Christine said, we should have that mentality sometime to leapfrog, right? To leapfrog from 3G to 5G, to leapfrog from there's no phone to cell phones, right? I think for a technology guide, how to really in this 21st century is how to. I work in Latin America for quite a few years. As we mentioned that in the last program, I traveled in Africa for quite a few months last year. It's a very fresh experience. So I think we want to leverage those technologies to help them to leapfrog, right? To leapfrog, as you mentioned, from $2-4 life to a much better life. I think that's important for us to technologies to add a strong angle. Okay. Yeah.
Let me throw out another question for the whole panel. We have an extraordinary contrast between perhaps the fastest dissemination of technology to the world that we've ever seen on one hand, and also one of the most difficult political environments for technology that we've seen certainly since the Cold War. People talk about a new tech Cold War. The United States has placed considerable restrictions on export of technology to China and tried to enlist other Western countries and Japan in this effort. Are these things going to clash? Will the technological competition and restrictions that have come out of the United States and some other countries, will that limit the dissemination of technology and the impact of this digital revolution around the world? I know it's a tough one, but I have to ask. Maybe Andy, you'd like to address that.
I'm sorry, but I think we're out of time. No, I think you raise a good question. I think it is quite possible that there will be, and already is, some negative impact from some of these extra issues. I think the model that President Biden has talked about over the years about a rules-based order, we have to try to build on some of the strong work within some particular regions of the world, some particular countries, to try to identify some global practices, some global best practices that and ethical principles that could be agreed to, hopefully with some transparency measures, and in the perfect world, hopefully with some accountability. But I think we have to start step by step in small ways where we can build some trust and provide some value. Hopefully, in the fight against climate change. Hopefully, in the effort to connect the unconnected. That can be a place. I hope data privacy can be a place that we could try to start in those areas and then try to build from there.
Yeah, let me add to that. Yeah. I think it's definitely, David, is a great question, straightforward question. I'm in the middle of it every day, so here in China. But what I just want to say one point. I look back to the history for the last, probably from the beginning of the first industrial revolution, the try to restrict technology transfer from one continent to the other continent, try to restrict from one country to another country. That happened many, many, many times, right? But at the end of the day, it didn't succeed. I think this time with in 21st century, with all the digital technologies, I think with the education levels, it will create some issues, but I think end of the day, we're gonna as a whole, we're gonna enjoy globally, we're gonna enjoy the development of technology as a whole, right? So I'm very, very confident. End of the day, when we look back, see, hey, the same as what we have seen in the history many, many times. Yeah.
Thank you, John. A listener asks me, well, what about the United States? Where does the United States stand in digital transformation? At the Mobile World Congress, one of your colleagues told me that in China, there are 10,000 private 5G networks in the 5G to business program already built, of which 60% are in manufacturing. In the United States, there might be a few dozen. I just haven't been able to find figures. And from what I can tell, the major telcos in the United States don't have sales teams for 5G to business. The port of Long Beach, which is our largest port, I believe is number 300, close to the bottom on the World Bank's ranking of port efficiency. And most of China's ports are in the top 10, along with Saudi Arabia and a couple of others. So we're clearly behind. So I'll save my last question for Christine Chang. If the United States declares itself to be a third world country, will the World Bank come and help us in our digital development?
What I want to say, David, is that there are a lot of issues in the world right now: geopolitical tension, the climate crisis, the economic downturn, and many others. But what we believe, I'm sure Andy and June would agree with me, is that the evolution of technology, the speed is very fast. and it gives opportunity to all countries to leapfrog. That's why, as governments, as businesses, and as individuals, we need to continue to keep up with the technology evolution and continue to learn and continue to stay ahead. So that's what I hope that all countries will do. But I also know that the infrastructure gap is huge. The investment gap is, 1 trillion by 2040. So I do hope that many companies will continue to innovate and help the World Bank and find development solutions for our client countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine Chang, Jun Xu, and Andy Purdy. Asia Times is honored to have spoken with you. We're grateful for your participation, and thank you, all of our listeners. The recording of this will be available on the Asia Times website and our YouTube channel, and I believe other venues as well. So with that, I will close the webinar with thanks again to all of you. Goodbye now.
Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.